be a catastrophe if we continue at this pace. This was foretold by our ancestors.
Viejos lo han predicho.
Enough of making Mother Nature cry. Enough of riding roughshod over rights.
Atropellando derechos.
All over the world, indigenous peoples are getting organized to defend their rights, their territories, and nature. This film gives examples of tools and strategies that they are using.
We need to get organized. We need to get organized. Okay, we want to protect our lands because we want to secure our rights to the lands. And what are we going to do?
We are getting ready. First, we must be prepared in the home, with our family, with our children, planning between siblings. We need to have our chakra, our fields where we grow all sorts of products. The fields need to be clean. We need to have good crops. So first we must organize here.
An important step is to raise the critical awareness of members of the community.
Our work is about awareness raising, about making sure that people know, that they understand. But it is a difficult task because awareness raising, in order to stand up to a company wielding great economic power, is difficult.
Para enfrentarse con una empresa de poder económico es muy difícil.
Ha sido tan fuerte la globalización.
Globalization has been so strong. The rubber plantations, the mining companies, the oil companies, consumerism itself has meant that many people do not have a life plan. They're unable to say, this is what we want to do with our lives, and they're easily absorbed. Even concepts such as life, solidarity, and the true meaning of development are changed, and everything is reduced to economics.
El concepto de un verdadero desarrollo y todo se reduce a temas económicos.
Communities need to raise awareness of the potential impacts of large-scale developments on their territories. This was done in Teluk Meranti, a community in Indonesia whose forests are threatened by a monoculture tree plantation.
We visited every area that was at risk and gathered the communities. We shared our views. The villagers who agreed with the company proposals did not know the impacts of their forest being cleared, or of a company entering their territory. After we shared our views and increased their understanding, thank God, they became aware.
Communities need to critically analyze who holds power in society.
Estábamos en desigualdad con.
We were in inequality with the government, with the companies. They had the economic power, the military, the police, the governing class. They bought people's consciences.
Awareness must also be raised about the tactics that companies use to gain access to indigenous peoples' territories. One such tactic is to create divisions in the community.
The most difficult part is that we're made to fight amongst ourselves, among villages, between siblings, between father and child. This is already happening here in Teluk Meranti. Facing the companies or the government is not so hard. The most difficult part is maintaining the balance to avoid fights.
Unity and organisation are essential to remain strong when faced with outside pressures. The Dayak community of Pendaun in Indonesia bases its unity on the communal work which is part of everyday life.
Hard work becomes lighter if we work together rather than alone. When we are together, we can talk, get information from friends. Also, since we all gather together for the communal work, things are more lively.
Gotong royong ini kan satu sama lain, ya yang namanya gotong royong bersama-sama, itu kan ramai jadinya.
Through communal work, we feel united in the village. Unity makes us feel strong.
Jadi kuat itu kita utuh, itulah.
Raising awareness and finding unity are important steps, but it is also essential for communities to be clear about their own vision of the future.
Indigenous peoples must redefine their history. Who are they? Where do they come from? Where are they going? And what is their contribution to human civilization on the planet?
Indigenous peoples around the world are developing their own life plans. Sarayaku is a Quechua community in Ecuador that decides where it wants to go as a people, rather than reacting to what outside interests propose.
Sarayaku tiene su propio desarrollo.
Here in Sarayaku, we have our own development. We live in harmony with our nature, our land, our rivers, our jungle. This is development. We are not worried. We do concern ourselves with living well. We are concerned that our river should not be contaminated. We concern ourselves to make food available each day, that our children are well fed, well nourished, robust, strong. And every day we are dreaming about what will happen. And we are planning, which is why we have a life plan. And with this life plan, we want to find well-being in every day.
En este plan de vida, primero lo que
The first things to come into the life plan is the knowledge of the elders and the vigor of the young. Here, the life plan has been developed on the basis of the participation of women, of the youth, of the elders, and of the children as well. And it is developed on the basis of the historical spoken tradition on our people's history. The life plan is a participatory construction. It is not developed by professionals. It is not developed from the outside. It is our own.
De afuera, es una construcción nuestra.
Indigenous peoples are using a range of communication tools to raise the awareness of others and ensure that they get as much support as possible for their struggles.
Without tools, we cannot defend ourselves when faced with threats. If we know how to use the computer, internet, and other tools, we can communicate with other indigenous peoples and with those who want to support us.
Luego, la comunidad, las autoridades deben estar más organizados haciendo.
The next step for the community to be organized is to be in contact with journalists and with solidarity networks nationally and internationally, so that they can sound the alert when the companies come.
Nos puede pasar después de pocos tiempos o cuando entran las empresas.
These letters were sent through the internet. We sent letters to the Minister of Forestry, the House of Representatives of the Republic of Indonesia, Regional House of Representatives, to the Governor, as well as the head of this company. I was interviewed by many foreign journalists. I did not count them, but there were very many. That created quite a stir and got the word out all the way to the international scene. The issue of the Kampar Peninsula forests was no longer a local issue, but became an international issue.
Bahkan sudah menjurus isu-isu sampai ke luar negeri, ke mancanegara.
The Kofan in the Ecuadorian Amazon are one of several indigenous peoples demanding redress from a multinational oil company for social and environmental damage on their territories.
I brought with me a letter signed by 4 nations so that Chevron would take responsibility and could clean up the contamination in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And I took with me 325,000 signatures from 150 countries to hand over. There is still environmental contamination in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and people say, Chevron must take responsibility. I will sign so that they take responsibility. This is how, little by little, we reach 325,000 signatures.
Several communities have used national or international courts to defend their rights and their territories. Without consulting the community, the government of Nicaragua granted a timber concession to a company on the territory of the Mayagnas community of Aguas Digni.
The first inhabitants of this land were us, the Mayagnas, our ancestors.
The community of Aguas Digni took the government of Nicaragua to court at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. The community won the case.
The verdict condemns the Nicaraguan state for having violated the human rights of the Mayagnas people of Aguas Digni. The court set a precedent in its verdict by recognizing the spiritual and material relationship that the Mayagnas people of Aguas Digni have with their territory.
The legal precedent set in the Aguas Digni decision has been used to defend hundreds of cases of indigenous peoples' territorial rights in court cases across Latin America.
On the 14th of December 2008, we received our title. In this way, we obtained our property and our rights.
Under international and national laws, there is a growing recognition that indigenous peoples must have the right to decide freely to accept or reject proposals to develop their traditional territories. This decision must be based on full information and before the development begins. This right is called free, prior, and informed consent.
We want companies to tell us what their program is before they start operating here. The community will reflect and decide whether to accept or reject the company's plans.
International instruments which protect indigenous peoples' rights include ILO 169, the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. Perhaps the most important tool is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which sets standards by which governments should recognize indigenous peoples' rights.
The UN Declaration is really a response of the international community to the problems that indigenous peoples face historically and up to the present, no? So it is a declaration that recognizes the rights of indigenous peoples to their lands, territories, and resources. It recognizes that indigenous peoples' consent should be obtained before any development project is brought into their communities. And it recognizes that indigenous peoples have the right to determine what is their political status vis-a-vis the state, and to determine how economic, social, and cultural development should take place in their own communities.
Locally, nationally, and internationally, Indigenous peoples are getting organized. Many put spirituality at the heart of their struggle.
Today we will hold a traditional ritual. The purpose of this is to reinforce the Pundown Indigenous community's stand against oil palm.
Keberadaan masyarakat adat Pendaun ini untuk menolak sawit. Setiap tahun diadakan.
Dalat Kramat, the guardian of this sacred place, will bless us and our prayers, especially to refuse oil palm plantations, industrial timber plantations, and mining concessions, which can destroy the lives of Indigenous peoples.
Y resistimos y luchamos.
We resisted and we struggled very strongly with our spirituality, with our cosmovision, with our wisdom, with our dreams. We are stopping the oil company.
Thousands of Indigenous peoples all over the world are successfully defending their rights, territories, and Mother Nature.
And this minerals is ours and land is ours. So we will not give a single inch to any mining industry. And for last 5 years, we have stalled all mining companies who have signed MOUs with state government. So this is the achievement of the indigenous people in Jharkhand, that they have resolved and they have not let any companies to enter in Jharkhand.
Indigenous peoples have a strong say about the future use of the world's natural resources, because so many of these are found on their territories.
We don't say in Jharkhand that we are poor. We are rich people because we have land, and below land we have minerals. So we are rich, and poor are this multinational company who are begging for land.
Given the resistance of Indigenous peoples around the world, given the fact that we can list hundreds of projects which are the subject of vigorous Indigenous peoples' resistance at the present time, could we actually foresee the collapse of the world's mining industry as we know it today?
Indigenous peoples are protecting their territories and their forests for their own futures, but also for the future of the world.
El trabajo que nosotros estamos realizando es para el beneficio del mundo. Aquí nosotros estamos conservando, estamos sembrando.
The work we are doing is for the benefit of the world.
De negociar estos recursos.
Here, we are protecting and we are planting, instead of negotiating these resources. We don't want the oil industry because it emits such a huge quantity of carbon, and this brings about climate change.
Y eso crea problemas de que actualmente está el cambio climático.
Queremos contribuir a la sociedad.
We want to contribute to society and to global civilization with our knowledge, with our ways of protecting the earth.
Nuestras formas de cuidar la tierra.
It's not only us indigenous people, but all humans on the planet must care for our natural resources. We must all be careful so that our environment is not destroyed.
Around the world, Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples' awareness of injustice, the destruction of nature, and climate change is growing. There is an ever stronger global movement in defense of Mother Earth. On every continent, in every country, people are demanding change.
Y pensamos que algún día vamos a triunfar esa lucha.
We think that one day we will win this struggle. All the peoples of the world are rising up, and this will become stronger and stronger. And we think that somewhere in the world, governments will change their ideology in order to govern peacefully. We want the governments to govern peacefully and to respect our rights.
I will continue to fight, even with my poverty and lack of education. I am sure that this is a fight for what is right. This forest I am fighting for cannot be measured with money. It is measured by dignity, self-worth, survival.
Stand firm, young people, adults and elders, even if they fill our houses with money. As long as we live, the land will stay for our children. Stand firm.
The more there are obstacles, interferences, weaknesses, difficulties, even within the community, we have to be still more united. If there is a weakness, if there are economic or social difficulties, or a lack of respect of rights, we have to be stronger, put forward our demands, never turn back. This will lead to victory.
Vamos a darle todo, dice, trabajo y seguridad. Daremos salud, daremos educación, porque somos buenos del corazón. Daremos salud, daremos educación, porque somos buenos del corazón. Pero nos defenderemos contra todas sus mentiras y engaños, por todos los que nosotros aquí vivimos y los que nacerán después.